bit about Father Dean. He well, he has been an Episcopal priest for 58 years, and just before his retirement, he came to Congress to help a mission church, St. Simon's Episcopal Church, become a full-fledged parish. And it is the custom of the Episcopal Church that when a priest retires, if he continues to live in the same community, he is obligated to attend church in some other parish as a courtesy to the new priest, so that he or she will be an unquestioned leader in that parish. So shortly after he retired, he became acquainted with Reverend Curtis and Gladys Wilson, and he began visiting the Unity Church. So eventually Father Dean began filling in for the Wilsons whenever they were out of town. So this Sunday is the 12th time that he has preached here. So let's give a warm welcome for Father Dean.
I know it's the custom to start out with a joke. Yes.
Father Dean.
A joke, but I can't
Father
think
Dean.
of something.
Father Dean. Yes. Thank you. Guys. All right.
These things wonderful.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay. There we are. I did want to share with you something funny that did happen in my last parish in Florida. It was a solemn high mass. I can't remember if it was, might have been Easter. And it was a big church, and the church was just packed. And then the procession began from the rear of the church to the altar. And the thurifer was swinging his incense, and then the bolt bearer was carrying the rest of the incense right behind him, and then came the crucifer and two torch bearers, and then all of the acolytes, and then the lay readers that were going to read different lessons, and then came the choir, and last of all, me, all dolled up like the Pope. I mean, that church happened to have some beautiful vestments and so on. And there was a little boy standing in between the pews, and he had turned around and he was facing, so he could see this procession coming. And then when he saw me, his eyes got as big as saucers, and he said, "Good morning, God." So it cracked me up. I could hardly go on from there. And, I want to talk with you this morning about a subject that I think is important, because I think there are an awful lot of people in our world today that don't have much more adequate view of God than the little boy did. And I'd like to have us think about what really is spirit. God is spirit. Maybe I'll climb up here. I made some notes. Oh, gracious. Surely I don't have to do all this. Well, I think first of all that we need we need to recognize that when people wonder, what is God like, where is He, and all that sort of thing, I don't think we can say that God is located in any particular place, because God is simultaneously everywhere. And I think that's what spirituality is, that we are encountering and we embody some of the Spirit of God ourselves. And it is our responsibility to allow the Spirit within us to transform us and to awaken us. Probably we've all had the experience of sensing something that was going to happen, that did happen. My very best friend, for instance, is quite psychic. And she had had several dreams about the death of some prominent people. Within a week of that dream, each one of them died of each dream. And the first one that I remember was Dwight Eisenhower. And then it was India's Nehru, and Russia's Gorbachev, and Egypt's Nasser, and America's Bobby Kennedy. She was teaching school at that time, and the kids were talking about politics, and she said, if Bobby Kennedy wins the nomination in California to become the next candidate for president, he will be assassinated. And when he was assassinated that very day that he won the nomination, the kids were just stunned by that. One of them came in and said, Mrs. Johnson, you really are a witch. But it isn't that. What it is that God gives us a glimpse of the future. A spirit is the only thing that can be present in the past, in the present, and in the future. That is the nature of God. God is the only source of a simultaneous knowledge of it all. But sometimes God gives us a clue if we need to know something. And that's why many people have these kinds of experiences. In a sense, for God, there is no such thing as time. And so that he sees the whole picture at all times. Well, it's awfully difficult to imagine what God is like. Because we're just beginning to realize how vast God's universe is. Suppose that you had a rocket ship that would travel the speed of light. That means you could go around the world 7 times in 1 second. Do you know how long it would take to get from here to the center of our own galaxy? 250 years. And our galaxy isn't necessarily the largest, and there are an estimated 800 million other galaxies. And the average galaxy, they estimate, would have 10 billion stars. And each of those stars, or most of them, would have planets revolving about them. Can you imagine a universe that size? It's unbelievable. So that if God was somewhere in particular, he might be a million light years away from us. But God is everywhere. And that is why we can communicate with God. But if God were not everywhere, if we were just one place, he would have to be even more astounding than Santa Claus, who can visit every child in the whole world in one night. Not only that, but he would know all these children and what it is each one of them would want. So God would have to be even brighter than that to be able to deal with these millions and millions of planets in our universe. But I think the important thing is God isn't way out there somewhere. God is within every living thing. When Jesus taught his disciples to pray, "Our Father who art in heaven," he was emphasizing that our relationship to God was more intimate than even our own parents. Our Father, everyone's Father. And we each have the genes of our own parents, but in a sense we have some of the genes of God. He has endowed us with the capacity to think beyond just the rational things, to be aware of that there is something that is beyond my understanding. And that is what faith is. Faith isn't believing that this and believing that. Faith is trusting in the Spirit of God who is present everywhere and in every situation. I had when I had a parish west of Chicago, there was another little church not far away, and I happened to know that minister. It was sort of Pentecostal, but I don't remember exactly what the name of it was. But the thing that attracted me was not necessarily the church. It was that this man was the most spiritually oriented man I'd ever encountered. And every Sunday afternoon he had a prayer group in his church. And people from all over, not necessarily members of his church, would come there for his prayer group because it was so meaningful. He would have a meditation and so on and speak about things that were important to the Spirit. But then toward the end, he would ask, was there anyone there who wanted personal prayers? There was one woman who came. She had driven 60 miles just to be there. And she got up and stood before him, and he asked her what the problem was. And she was speechless. She couldn't say a word. And he waited patiently. And then finally he closed his eyes, and you could tell that he was meditating. And all at once he opened his eyes like he was startled, and he said to her, "You're afraid of your husband." And then he went on to explain other things about it, details about it. And every time she nodded her head, "That's true." And then she became a little more relaxed. And so he offered her counsel. I wish I'd had a tape recorder because I had never heard anyone give such marvelous counsel as that man did. Oh goodness, I didn't need to write all these things. few months later, I think it was on New Year's Eve, the same pastor had scheduled a healing service in his church. He thought that was a better way to celebrate the coming year. And there was a layman there from Arizona. I think he was a general contractor, a welder, but he had a healing gift, and so he came for that. And there was a woman who came up and asked for healing, and I recognized that she probably had had polio when she was young, because one leg was about this much shorter than the other, and she had worn a built-up shoe. And I was standing there with him, and he said, would you hold her feet off the floor? And so I knelt down and I held both feet in my hands while he prayed for her. And suddenly, I felt that foot move. And when he'd finished the prayer, he asked her to remove her shoes, both of them, and she could stand up straight. I find it difficult to believe myself, but I was there and I felt the leg move. And since then, I've encountered a great many other strange healings. There is no limit for God. And when you think about the miracles of Jesus, he knew that. There was nothing that he would not try. We have each inherited some of the Spirit of God. For example, the ability to think the way we can, to be aware of the possibility of God out there and God within, and to hear the voice of God in our own hearts. We can listen, we can see, and we can dream because we are his children. And we can want what is good, which is what God wants. We can be our Father's hands and feet. When we see people in need, we can be his hands and feet to help that person. And we're always able to extend God's love to someone who needs it. God expects us to do the best we can, but we often fail to recognize what that is. How much can we do? If we are open to the Spirit of God, he does it, but he often does it through you, or through me. I remember when we lived in Tallahassee, Florida, the Roman Catholic Church leased one of their great auditoriums for a priest who was coming there who had a healing gift. And he didn't go around laying hands on people, but he stood before this huge congregation and he'd say something like, there is a boy here, about 15 years old, who is deaf. And would you please come down here? Would you help him down there? And he laid hands on him. and prayed for him. And he said, "Can you hear me now?" Yes. "Can you hear me now?" Yes. "Can you hear me now?" Yes. We doubt that there is such a thing as spirit, or many people doubt it. And I'm sure that we've all had our moments when we did. But God is there always. Once in a while, God allows us to see a spirit, or a ghost. I've never seen one. But one day, we were camping in a beautiful campsite and right by a lake. And I was sitting on a log just looking out over the water, and all at once I saw two people come walking up out of the water. They seemed to be maybe in their late 20s, and she looked to be probably 7 months pregnant. And for some reason they were walking straight toward me. And just before they got to me, I realized I could see faintly right through them, and realized that these were ghosts. And they stood there waiting for me to say something. And he turned to her, and finally I was so flabbergasted I couldn't say a word. And he turned to her and he said, "He can't help us." And he walked away, and in about 20 feet he was gone. But she stood there, and I still couldn't talk. and I didn't say it, but I stood there watching it fade away. And it's one of the things that I regret most, that I couldn't muster up my own consciousness there. And because it would have been marvelous to have heard their story, and also to have found out what the next life is like. But I missed that opportunity. Well, a month or so later, a friend of ours had to have surgery, and she had two little children, so we volunteered to take care of the children. One was a baby, and the other was a 4-year-old boy. And she had sniffles this morning. So when it was bedtime, we put the baby between us in the bed and way up near the headboard. And we had a little cot at the foot of the bed. And everyone went to sleep, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and there was a woman standing beside the bed and looking down at the baby. And I thought it was my wife. And I said, "What are you doing?" No answer. I said, "You have to go pee or something." And this woman turned like this toward me with the expression on her face, "What business is it of yours?" and I realized it wasn't my wife. She was still alive. And then she didn't say a word. Then she turned and walked around to the foot of the bed and stood over the baby and disappeared. So when our friend got out of the hospital and came to get her children, I asked her, "Do you know anyone who has died recently who looks like," and then I described this woman that was standing by the bed. And she said, "Oh, that sounds just exactly like my grandmother. She died last January." So we concluded that Grandma was worried about the children and had to come and make sure that everything was okay. I had a parish in Gainesville, Florida. We had 3 Episcopal priests and a Greek Orthodox priest. And we also had a Greek Orthodox congregation and an Episcopal one. But the Greek priest was, well, the congregation was smaller. It was only a couple of hundred people. But he was a physician. And he taught at the University Medical School in Gainesville, Florida. And then he served this parish on Sundays. And he was telling me about one time they were operating on a girl, surgically on lungs. And the girl died on the operating table, and they tried to revive her. And it worked on her for quite a while. And then he thought it was his responsibility to go tell the parents what happened. So he left the operating room and went, it was a city block away, to the waiting room where the parents were, and told them the bad news. And when he got back to the operating room, the other physicians had managed to revive her. And so she went to actually, what's the word?
I see.
Yeah. And she was, when she got better, then they came to visit her. And one of them said, what was that like? And she said, I saw, it was like I was looking down from the corner of the ceiling, and I saw these doctors working on my body, and she repeated what they were saying, what they had said, and she said, then I saw my body lying still, and Dr. Mangus left and went out the hallway and walked all the way down to where my parents were, and he told me, and she repeated what he said and what the parents said, word for word. Her spirit was there. She knew what was going on. The Spirit of God, I believe, is embedded in every living thing, both animals and even plants. I knew a Presbyterian minister from California who also had advanced degrees in science. And even though he was a full-time clergyman, he did research on this one question. Can plants think? Are they alive like we are alive? And he tried a test, put one of these lie detectors on the plant to detect any kind of a quivering or whatever. And then had a man of his choice to go into the lab and take a cigarette lighter and hold the flame under one leaf. And all at once the whole plant was shaking. He hadn't come back the next day, and with the intention of doing the same thing again. And as he approached this plant, it began shaking before he could get the cigarette lighter out. And then he came back the next day and stood outside the door with the intention of lighting that cigarette lighter and the plant. Is it possible a plant could have ESP? And no, but that man was outside. But think of the animals who have ESP. How in the world, if a little bird is hatched out in a nest in northern Minnesota and both of its parents were killed by predators, how is it that that bird would still know how to fly to South America and nest where his parents had nested before? That happens. When in San Francisco in 1906, there was that terrible earthquake and then a fire that almost destroyed the entire city. Someone noted in the record of it all that many people said that all of their pets disappeared the day before that happened. Animals perceived that this was going to happen, and they got out there when we didn't perceive it. And the same kind of thing had happened at the tsunami in Southeast Asia, things like that. And I remember the account of an elephant trying to go up the mountain because this tsunami was coming. And there was a little girl running in front of him. And he wrapped his trunk around that little girl and ran. He took her up high enough so they'd be safe. You see, what we think with our brain isn't necessarily who we are. There's much more to us than that. Because we have the capacity to perceive that even that which has not yet happened, if God shows it to us. One thing that we do need to do, though, is to honor that. To be aware of the fact that God endowed us with talents and abilities that if we don't use them, we lose them.